You're free to think whatever you want about this game. Morality is a very important part of storytelling in a video game. Not only does it give you a drive to Undertale, this game proudly advertised that you could go through the entire game without killing anyone, so obviously morality is the key focus with this game. Want as an ingredient for your pie, or Asgore having a hunch that he's killed you before. It's a neat little touch to the game that, for the most part, is harmless. Acting as the villain, you get an ND worthy of a villain. I don't want to spoil too much, but let's just say, it'll leave you pretty dang unsatisfied, and I have to admit, a route from YouTube a coward, it's terribly assumptive to be honest. He sort of assumed that you're too afraid to do a genocide run because you don't want the consequences, but in reality there's plenty of reasons you could have not have done it. For one, as a standalone RPG, Undertale is kind of, well, lame. At no part is it really at all engaging, it's just there. There's no depth, you have a terribly small selection of armor and weapons, there's no special abilities, a minimal focus on strategy, etc, etc. Setting aside the RPG elements, Undertale just seriously lacks replay value. And while that isn't necessarily a bad thing, there's barely a reason to come back to it thanks to the heavy dialogue focus. There's also people who are curious as to if it's actually worth their time or not. And then there's just the fact that not everybody is actually interested in playing the game. If you've been around the gaming community for a while, you'd know that there's plenty of people who will watch plenty of footage of a game, but they actually have no interest in playing it, they just like watching it. Kind of like me in Super Smash Bros. Melee. Humans are incredibly observant, curious, and hypothetical. That's just how we are. Undertale shames you for getting too curious with it, wanting to try new things to see what happens. And this, to me, is wrong, because it's shaming you for basically being an ordinary human. If you're a completionist, then this game is basically shaming you for trying to gain greater knowledge about the game. Now, of course, people can get dangerously curious, but if there's zero consequence for pursuing that curiosity, then I can't really see what the problem is here. The game even points this out, showing that we're cruel, curious beings who torture in-game characters to learn everything involving lore, and ultimately the game will punish you for your genocide run. But even when you get the genocide ending and permanently ruin your chance of getting a perfect pacifist ending, ultimately in the end you didn't actually suffer any consequences, your copy of the game just got messed up a bit. But here's the bigger problem with the game. With it berating you as much as it does for certain actions, such as killing Toriel and then resetting to spare her, it really does send a rather condescending message to you. Mr. Toby Fox is basically telling us at this point that his writing is so good that the characters he wrote out should be treated as if they were real human beings. Not only is this incredibly pretentious, but that's an incredibly toxic message to teach people. And obviously this is working because some people really get triggered when you kill a certain character that they really like. And they absolutely hate it if you kill Papyrus. I'm not gonna lie, I both like and hate Papyrus. He's pretty innocent, but he's really annoying. And sometimes he takes up more screen time than what's really needed. I don't want to sound really cliche, but it's just a video game. There's no reason to treat these characters like they're actually your friends. Yes, they were well fleshed out, I will admit that, but the obsession people have with these characters is both creepy and unhealthy. If you found yourself enjoying the genocide route the most, I mean, to me that's okay. It's the more challenging route and you get to see characters act in a different and very interesting way. This route absolutely nails the perspective of a mass murderer, and albeit heavily exaggerated, it shows the absolute worst of you in a metaphorical sense. But no. The game, as well as the community, thinks you're a god-awful person for screwing around in a fictional world. But the genocide route's opposite, the pacifist route, albeit pretty good, its finale is kind of stupid to a degree. It sugarcoats the acts of kindness as, if you just try to sit down and understand everybody's problems, you can become great friends with them. The game then goes to exaggerate this to an incredibly unrealistic degree where you'll have plenty of friends and all you'll have to do now is believe in your dreams and all of your fans will be there to back you up. I don't know. I mean, what is this, an edutainment game? This is something you teach to small children, not everybody older. I don't want to be the Danny Downer here, but the world isn't fair nor your friend. I honestly would have preferred the story went in a direction such as only your true friends will be there for you. Because having roughly 63 true friends is absolutely absurd. Either that or Frisk is the luckiest person on the planet. You know, for a game that takes a decent amount of inspiration from Earthbound, it really does try to make itself as parallel from the game as possible, as one of Earthbound's biggest lessons is that the world is not your friend, and that it can be tough facing the truth. Undertale wanted to give off the vibe of a little kindness can go a long way, but wow does it really screw it up. But coming back to the berating for one last time, this idea of calling you a legitimately bad person for killing virtual characters, to me, is no better than the idiotic video games causes violence movement. Yes, I think it's that dumb. I'm not trying to call Toby Fox dumb, as heck, he knows how to make a game, so he's gotta be pretty smart. But everywhere I go, everybody says that this game has the best writing in the last 10 years of gaming, and while it is really good at certain parts, especially how the characters react in the genocide route, the overall message is that this game tries to get across is both dubious and virulent. And I can't see where people are getting this idea from. Now, is it really clever? Yes, but the cleverness is what adds to the problem in my opinion. Look, I understand that this game can be good for people who are currently going through hard times, praising good acts and bashing bad ones while simultaneously calling out humans as dangerously curious creatures, like we didn't know that. But if the game is getting to you so much to the point where you're treating these characters like they're actually your friends, which is like 70% of the fan base, I don't mean to be rude, but you seriously need to get out there and make some friends. Trust me, it'll go a longer way. But hey, what do I know? All the issues I mentioned either means that I don't understand that, or Toby Fox intended that, right? And that is all I have to say about this. Whew. If this doesn't give me a one-way ticket to my death, I'm really not sure what will. Oh yeah, and one last message to Toby about the genocide route before I sign out. Don't get mad at us because your game got boring. But wait, there is more! Since I'm already here and I don't feel like making another Undertale video about this, why don't I just sum up my feelings about the entire game, right here, right now. Undertale, despite everything I mentioned about how it has major issues in the writing, is a great game. The writing clearly had effort put into it, and the fact that there's plenty of alternative dialogues that you can achieve just shows you how much Toby cared about this project. The main characters, by far, have the most interesting things to say, especially Sans, him being the most interesting throughout all of the routes. Although there were a few characters that could have been fleshed out much better, such as Muffet or King Asgore. He just wasn't that interesting to me. The game has a big focus on emotion, which sometimes does end up in a mess. I understand that the characters in this game can be really silly, but you just can't have a sad or emotional moment here, and then right after that, have some silly moments pop up. It just doesn't flow right. By far, the best use of emotion to silliness is when you're doing the genocide part with Papyrus. He comes in being his silly self and everything, but then slowly realizes that you're not in the mood for any of his shenanigans, and then decides to stop and try to convince you to become friends so you can start bettering yourself. That's how you handle the more emotional moments. You don't make them incredibly sudden. And this isn't to say that every emotional and silly moment is abrupt. There's just a few moments here and there where it was poorly executed. As for the humor itself, it was pretty alright. There were plenty of moments where I just chuckled, but not really laughed. I can't really see what people find to be so funny in this game, and a few attempts just had me sitting there in dead silence. Maybe I'm just an underdeveloped human being or something, I don't know. However, there were a few attempts that were outright hilarious to me, I won't lie. But overall, this is just a chuckle-worthy game to me. A few people have compared this game to Earthbound, and while I can see a few bits here and there of inspiration, I personally barely see any connection. I also think it's unfair to compare the two, because one, like I've mentioned, Undertale's combat is not very good, and two, the way Undertale wants you to play the game is really not like an RPG at all. Every encounter is more of an interaction, if anything. The only thing Undertale really has on its side versus Earthbound is its writing, and even then I think Earthbound wins. You don't need multiple instances of dialogue to be better. Yes, I just said that, and no, I'm not taking that back. I also like to look at it this way. For 10 bucks, you can play Undertale, a great 6-hour game with a decent amount of interesting characters and some good puzzles. Or you can pay 8 bucks for Earthbound, a great 40-hour game with very engaging combat and a huge roster of interesting yet quirky characters, as well as excellent storytelling and one heck of an ending. But setting comparisons aside, Undertale was a pretty good time, and if there were to ever be DLC made for the game, I'd be more than glad to get it for an excuse to play the game again. But as always, I thank you all for watching. I'm RoberOnocle, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.